Matthew chapter 24, verses 7 and 8. And let's look at this one together. Zephaniah chapter 1, verses 14 through 16 says, "The great day of the Lord." The day of the Lord, you've heard me mention this in other teachings, is a catchphrase. It's always talking about the tribulation. It's the day of Yahweh. The great day of the Lord is near, near and coming quickly. Listen, the cry on the day of the Lord will be bitter, the shouting of the warrior there. That day will be a day of wrath, a day of distress and anguish, a day of trouble and ruin, a day of darkness and gloom, a day of clouds and blackness, a day of trumpet and battle cry against the fortified cities and against the corner towers. That, a day of trumpet, that's Yom Teruah. This is referring to the Feast of Trumpets. It's telling us there that the day of the Lord will be on the Feast of Trumpets. The Feast of Trumpets. It's also known as the Day of the Awakening Blast. Look at Daniel chapter 12, verse 2. Look at Isaiah chapter 26, verse 19. Look at 1 Thessalonians 4, verse 16. The last trump. A lot of people say that this has to do with the book of Revelation because of the trumpets in Revelation. And they say, oh, that's referring to the last trumpet. I say, that can't be so, because God wouldn't give his word referring to something that had not yet been revealed. The word that God gave us in the book of Revelation was revealed some 30 years or more after the book of Thessalonians. And also, this last trump is referring to the Feast of Trumpets. On the Feast of Trumpets, they blow the shofar 100 times, using 3 different sounds. The first is called the Tekiah, which is a long, straight blast. The second sound is the Shevarim, 3 short blasts. And then finally, you have the Teruah, which is 9 quick blasts in short succession. These 3 sounds are blown 3 times for a total of 9. That series of 9 is blown 11 times. That's 99 times. And then one long final blast equals 100, and that's known as the last trump. If you look at 1 Corinthians 15:51, that again is referring to the Feast of Trumpets. It's something that the Jews all knew about. And if you have to read the Bible with the mindset of the Hebrew. Because those are the ones, that's the kind of mindset that was writing it and reading it and so on. And so, the last trump is talking about these trumpet blasts that are regarding the Feast of Trumpets. Pentecost is also known as the first trump. Yom Teruah is always known as the last trump. That's the Feast of Trumpets. And Yom Kippur is known as the great trump. We're going to get to that one next, the Feast of the Day of Atonement. Now, the Feast of Trumpets is also known as the Day of Judgment, Yom Hadin. It's also known as the opening of the books, the opening of the gates. If you look at Revelation 14:14, it speaks of the fall feasts. Yom Teruah is the day the books are opened and all pass before the heavenly judge. And on Yom Kippur, 10 days later, the books are closed and the sentence is enforced. Jewish tradition holds that on these days, every year, the books are opened in heaven, and God looks us over. The trial lasts for 10 days. It's a time for us to repent. 2 Corinthians 5:10, Daniel 7:10 and 11, Revelation chapter 20 verses 11 and 12, Psalm 24 verses 7 through 10. These are all talking about Yom Teruah, the Feast of Trumpets. Psalm 118. Joel chapter 2 verses 1 and 2. And let's look at one together. That's Isaiah chapter 26 verse 20, which reads, "Go, my people, enter your rooms and shut the doors behind you. Hide yourselves for a little while until his wrath has passed by." Hide yourselves for a little while until his wrath has passed by. This is referring to the hidden day, the Feast of Trumpets, and I believe is also a reference to the harpazo. Go, my people, enter your rooms. Look at John 14:1. Yeshua says, "In my Father's house there are many rooms. I go away to prepare a place to you, that where I am you might be, and if I go I will return to take you to be with me." He returns to take those to be with him. You don't see that at the second coming. The Feast of Trumpets is also the wedding of the Messiah. Joel chapter 2 verses 15 and 16. The wedding takes place at the same time as the blowing of the shofar. And then it's also involves the coronation of the Messiah. Look at Revelation chapter 4. Like a trumpet, that's talking about the shofar. And so the coronation of Yeshua, receiving his crown, that will be on this date, the Feast of Trumpets. Next, we have the Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. This happens on the 10th day of the 7th month. It is the day of fasting. Look at Acts chapter 27, verse 9. The fasting is mentioned there. That was on Yom Kippur. If you look at Leviticus chapter 16, verse 33, you'll see Yom Kippurim. That includes several atonements. But this festival involves two scapegoats, known as the Azazel. One goes out into the wilderness. Some people say that the scapegoat represents Satan. No way. How could Satan atone for anything? On the very first Passover in history, they put the blood on the doorposts and they left Egypt. On the very first Pentecost in history, they received the 10 Commandments. And on the very first Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement, Exodus 32:30, Moses makes atonement for Israel because they worshiped the golden calf. He offered his own life for them. How many of us would do that? This is Yom Kippur is also known as the Day of Grace. It's a new beginning. Their sins were atoned for prophetically. This shadows Yahweh's plan for the final deposition of sin, the creation of a new earth where righteousness dwells. Look at 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 13. Look also at Micah chapter 7, verse 19. And if you ever heard the story about the high priest, once a year he would go into the Holy of Holies and they'd have to tie a rope around his ankle because nobody could go in there, and if he died, how could they save him? So they tied a rope around his ankle so that they could pull him out. I may have told that story in one of my videos. It's just a story. It's not true. They didn't do that. Anyway, the Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement, also known as the Day of Grace. This is followed by the Day of Vengeance and the Day of Judgment. For that, you can look at Revelation 19. Matthew 23, verse 39. It's on this day, Yom Kippur, that the Jews will realize that Yeshua is the Messiah. Look at Revelation chapter 12, verse 6.